Before starting the story, please like and subscribe the channel. I am just an old lad that is trying hard to get by. Okay, let's dive into the story. I used to work at a hotel in my town. I'm not going to say where exactly for reasons that will become clear. A few months ago, the town was hit hard by a hurricane. Lots of houses were wrecked and people were forced to leave. This hotel, about a 20-minute walk from my house, became a temporary home for some of those people. It wasn't a luxury place by any means, just your standard bed and breakfast type joint where you'd get soggy scrambled eggs, frozen sausages, and the usual selection of cereals in the morning. After the initial surge of guests following the hurricane, things slowed down. A lot. Quieter than it had been before the disaster. My shifts were always nights, from 6 p.m. until 2 a.m. After me, another employee would take over until morning. Since the hotel had only about 9 rooms occupied at the time, I could easily go a whole night without seeing a single guest. There was a small break room for employees, where we had a coffee machine, a fridge, a table, and a couple of old, saggy chairs. That's where I spent most of my time during the shift, listening for the bell at the front desk in case someone needed help. One night, I was in the break room when I heard a deep voice from the lobby calling out, "Hello," over and over again. I went to the front desk and saw a man standing on the other side of the glass partition. The glass had a small opening at the bottom, just big enough to pass things through. The man asked for some towels, so I grabbed a couple and pushed them through the slot. He yanked them out of my hand in a way that made me uneasy. He stared at me for a second with this strange look, then turned and walked down the hallway toward the rooms. I watched him on the security monitors from behind the desk. He was walking oddly, glancing around like he wasn't sure where he was, and then he started rubbing the towels on his face. I couldn't help but mutter, "What the hell," to myself. The man got into the elevator, and I decided to head back to the break room. Not even 10 minutes later, I heard the voice again. I went back out, and the same guy was standing at the desk, looking more agitated this time. He claimed his keycard wasn't working. When I asked for his room number, he said something like 2C, which didn't make any sense because our rooms were all numbered without letters. I knew right then that something was off. I asked him, "Are you sure you're staying here?" "We don't have room numbers with letters." That's when things got really scary. He threw the towels on the floor and grinned at me, this creepy, slow smile, while tilting his head to one side. He leaned forward, pressing his face to the glass, and whispered, "I'm going to kill you." I was frozen in shock as he repeated it, louder each time until he was practically shouting at me through the glass. I grabbed the phone and told him I was calling the police. I even showed him as I dialed 911. He didn't seem to care. In fact, he started mocking me, imitating what I was saying to the dispatcher. Then as I described the situation to the operator, he slowly walked out of the lobby, laughing as he went. The dispatcher asked if I still wanted an officer to come, and stupidly, I told her it was fine and that he was gone. The rest of my shift dragged on, and I stayed out in the lobby instead of hiding in the break room. I was still on edge, watching the monitors. At around 2 a.m., another guest checked in, and finally my relief showed up. I clocked out and left, feeling an unsettling chill in the air. I hadn't brought a coat, so I put my hood up and stuffed my hands into my jacket pockets, hurrying across the parking lot. That's when I heard a voice. I stopped, looking around the dimly lit lot, but there was no one in sight. The sound came again, this time from somewhere near the bushes that lined the building. I didn't wait to find out who it was. I kept walking, faster now, and left the parking lot. The main road was empty, not a car in sight. After a minute or so, I turned onto the residential street that would take me home. The quiet was oppressive. I could only hear my footsteps on the pavement. Then I heard a second set of footsteps, quick and light, like someone running on tiptoes behind me. I spun around, but the footsteps stopped. There was a parked car nearby, and I just knew someone was hiding behind it. Then I heard a low laugh. My heart dropped. The familiar voice whispered, "I'm going to kill you." I didn't need to see him to know who it was. It was the man from earlier. I looked around trying to figure out what to do. I wasn't going to outrun him, especially not in my work shoes. My eyes landed on a house down the street with an upstairs light on. Someone was awake. I sprinted toward it, yelling for help. I reached the door, ringing the bell frantically. Just as I did, I felt his hands around my neck. He pulled me backward, choking me, and whispered in my ear, "Die." I thought that was it. I was done. But then the front door burst open, and the man from the house shouted at my attacker. The man's grip loosened, and I collapsed to the ground. I never even looked to see him run away. The homeowner helped me inside, gave me water, and called the police. I explained everything to them when they arrived. They took a look at the CCTV footage from the hotel and asked me to come down to the station later for a lineup. I sat there for what felt like forever, staring at the faces, but none of them looked right. I couldn't identify him. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that I might have let that man go free. Maybe I just couldn't remember his face, or maybe the fear clouded my judgment. Either way, I'll never forget the terror of that night. I used to work in the pro department of a home improvement store, covering the closing shift with another cashier named Nicole. Nicole was friendly but quiet, and unfortunately, she got a lot of attention from the contractors who came in, more than she liked. A lot of them would flirt with her, ask her out, or compliment her, and she wasn't comfortable with it. Nicole had a girlfriend, but she didn't feel it was anyone's business, so she kept it private and simply turned them down politely. Nicole and I quickly became close friends. Working together meant we could cover for each other's lunch breaks, making the shifts less lonely. One day after I got back from my break, Nicole mentioned a guy who had been hitting on her earlier in the day. She said she told him she was already seeing someone, and while he wasn't happy about it, he left. It seemed like just another customer, so I didn't think much of it. Later, though, the same guy came back. Nicole was helping a customer at the time, so I was alone at the register when he walked up. He looked normal enough, maybe even attractive to some women, but there was something off about his demeanor. He told me he was looking for Nicole, claiming she had agreed to go out with him, and he was here to pick her up. That set off alarm bells as I knew she had turned him down earlier. I told him she had already left for the day, trying to protect her. His smile disappeared, and he started acting irritated, insisting he wanted to see her again. His story didn't even add up anymore. First, she supposedly agreed to go out with him. Now he was asking her out again. I wasn't good at coming up with lies on the spot, but I didn't want to reveal anything personal about Nicole. Without thinking, I blurted out that Nicole was my fiancée. His expression changed from annoyed to confused. He asked how someone like her could be with someone like me, which stung a little. But I ignored it and told him we were getting married in a few months, so he needed to leave her alone. He gave me this hard, cold stare, but didn't say anything, eventually turning and walking out. When Nicole came back, I told her what happened. She found the whole fiancé excuse pretty funny and even joked that she'd rather be engaged to me than go out with him. A few weeks passed, and the incident was all but forgotten. Then one night after it got dark, we were getting ready to close the store. Nicole and I were gathering trash bags when we heard a loud banging on the door, startling both of us. We looked over, and it was him again, pressing his face against the glass with this wild look in his eyes. I told him we were closed, but he shouted that he needed to come in. Nicole stepped forward and told him to leave her alone, that she wasn't interested. He yelled back that he wasn't there for her, he was there for me. He started shouting that if he could take out her husband, she would be his. It became clear that this guy wanted to kill me. I told Nicole to run to the manager's office and call the police, while I stayed at the register to keep an eye on him. I was terrified, thinking about how vulnerable I was in that small space with nothing to protect myself. He wasn't a particularly big guy, but who knew if he had a weapon? The store didn't allow us to carry any self-defense items, so I was on my own. He started ramming the sliding doors, and I was sure they would break any second. Just then, Nicole came back around the corner, holding a 2x4 in her hands, and yelled that the cops were on their way. At that moment, the man decided to leave. When the police arrived, the closing manager showed them the security footage, and thankfully they caught the guy and arrested him. Even though he was caught, neither Nicole nor I felt safe working there anymore. We both eventually found other jobs and stayed friends, attending the same college. I'm grateful Nicole was there that night with the 2x4 because I hate to imagine what might have happened if I had been alone. Nicole later told me she was glad I was there for her too, saying that having a guy around made it less likely that someone like him would try something. The whole experience was a reminder of how dangerous it can be for women when a guy won't take no for an answer. This happened about 2 years ago, and I still think about it sometimes. It was 2016, and I had just started a new job at a small motel. The pay wasn't great, but I needed an office job, and a friend of mine, Michael, got me the position. I did a few days of training with the owner during the mornings, and then Michael trained me during the night shifts. Our shift was from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and it was mostly uneventful, checking guests in, handling paperwork, nothing too exciting. The owner of the motel went on vacation for a week with his wife, which meant I had to handle my first night shift alone much sooner than expected. The motel had security cameras set up around the property, and I could monitor them from a screen in the office. The office itself had large glass windows all around, and the front door was also glass. Unlike many motels, we didn't have a night window, which always made me a little uneasy. It was about 1 a.m. when a man walked in, asking if there were any rooms available. Usually, if someone seemed sketchy, the owner would tell me to lie and say we were fully booked. But this guy didn't raise any immediate red flags, so I told him we had a room available. As I was putting his reservation into the system, I noticed him swatting at the air and making strange spitting noises, like he was trying to get rid of invisible flies. It was bizarre, but I didn't want to provoke any confrontation, so I checked him in as quickly as possible, handed him his key, and sent him on his way. Not long after, he came back, pounding on the glass door and startling me. I looked up, and there he was, just standing there, staring at me. He cracked the door open, stuck his head through, and started shouting that he couldn't get into his room. He asked, "Why won't you let me into my room?" I tried to stay calm and offered to give him a new key, assuming maybe something had gone wrong with the first one. But the look in his eyes was terrifying. There was something very wrong with him. I handed him the new key, and he went back to his room. At this point, I started panicking. I texted Michael for advice, but it was the middle of the night, and he was asleep. I didn't know what to do. I kept an eye on the cameras, and sure enough, the man came back down the stairs a few minutes later, heading toward the office. That's when I truly started to freak out. I ran to the back office, locked the door, and pulled out a small pocket knife I kept for protection. I could hear him outside, yelling through the office, asking why I wouldn't let him into his room and if I didn't like him. My first instinct was to call the police, but for some reason, probably out of fear, I didn't. Instead, I yelled through the door, telling him I was on the phone and would be out in a minute. The man eventually went into the bathroom, and I could hear him muttering to himself, saying things like, "Kill her, kill her." My heart dropped. I knew I should have called the police, but I was still too scared to do it. When he came out of the bathroom, I stepped out of the office and tried to remain calm. I apologized, told him his key was broken again, and offered to walk him to his room. I had my knife hidden in the sleeve of my sweater, gripping it tightly as we walked. He insisted on walking behind me, which made me incredibly nervous. When we reached the rooms, he stopped in front of the wrong one, and I quickly pointed out that his room was a few doors down. All this time, he had been trying to enter someone else's room. The thought of what could have happened made me sick to my stomach. After getting him into his actual room, I ran back to the office and locked the door. The next guest I checked in happened to be a police officer from a nearby town, and I ended up confiding in him about what had just happened. He offered to keep an eye out for anything unusual. The next night, the man came back to the motel, but I had locked the doors and told him we were fully booked. When the owner returned from his vacation, I explained everything to him, but he didn't seem to take it seriously. Despite that, I continued working the night shifts for another year, during which other strange incidents occurred, but this one was by far the worst.